Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. I do hope you've all had a good weekend. And do you remember how in the last couple of episodes we've been talking about how big companies are really not your friend, even if they do spend an awful lot of time and money trying to convince you that games have a tendency to become more and more complicated as time goes on and developers try to cram more and more features in, and how as games get bigger and more popular, the developers tend to focus more on the lower common denominator who really doesn't have much of a clue how the game actually works, but who are the biggest source of income for that game, particularly in the free-to-play market. And, well, those pigeons are coming home to roost today, because I'm mostly going to be talking about the commander skill rework in World of Warships. I think it's probably fair to say that the commander skills rework has been one of the biggest and most controversial changes that has happened in World of Warships since it went live 5 years ago. It's worth pointing out that this is not the first time World of Warships has reworked its commander skills. They revised the commander skill tree a couple of years ago, and back then, even though it was nowhere near as comprehensive a rework, there were loud cries from all quarters of, "Oh my god, what have you done? You've ruined the game, this is broken, that's it, I'm never playing again." In fact, yours truly himself was particularly critical of one new skill that was introduced, the RPF skill, Radio Position Finding. The skill that points the way to the nearest enemy ship, and I went on record as saying that this was going to completely ruin the way the game worked in the last 5 minutes of the match, when there weren't many ships left, and knowing exactly where the last surviving enemy ship, for example, was going to completely destroy endgame gameplay. I was, of course, completely wrong. And that's something I want you to bear in mind when we come to discuss certain of the new skills in the Commander rework. It's often the case that when something changes in a game that we know and love, people don't like change. People get comfortable with playing the game the way they used to. And when something comes along that radically shakes that up, rather than adapting to the new meta, it's a lot easier for people to just complain that the game's broken. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case this time, but it might be. It's still early days. It's too early to really tell. What I'm trying to do here is give a balanced and objective viewpoint, rather than simply doing what I did the last time they revised the captain skills and saying, "Oh my god, this is terrible, you've broken the game, what are you, a bunch of idiots?" It may very well be that they are a bunch of idiots. But we need to stop, take a step back, try to look at it unemotionally, and figure out if that is in fact the case. So let's look at the good points here first, or at least what I consider to be the good points. So we've gone from a system where there's one set of skills for every captain, regardless of the ship that that captain is assigned to a new system where there are separate and discrete skill trees for destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers. So in theory, you could have a captain that you could use on any type of ship. Unfortunately, that sounds good on paper, but in practice, you still have to pay to retrain a captain from one ship to another. So while in theory you could have just one captain for each nation and move that captain around from ship to ship every time you hit the random battle button, that would quickly become prohibitively expensive because you'd have to pay to retrain the captain to each ship that you move them to. It's only really something that you can practically do with captains that you use on premium ships, because you don't have to pay to retrain a captain when you assign them to a premium ship. Now that kind of defeats the purpose of having premium ships in the first place, of course, because that was the benefit of having premium ships, or one of them. You didn't have to pay for a captain to retrain to take command of a premium ship. Premium ships could be used as training ships for captains of other ships. So in theory, you could take advantage of the new system in this way, having just the one captain for each nation that you would use on all of your premium ships, but, well, then you would only really be using that captain on your premium ships and you wouldn't be playing anything else. So is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a step forward or a step backwards? Well, it depends how many premium ships you've got, I suppose. But for the vast majority of players, it's definitely not quite as useful an option as it may have first appeared when we first heard about it. Next, the number of skill points that captains can have has increased from 19 to 21. Again, this is a good thing, probably, except it takes as much commander experience to move from 19 skill points to 21 skill points as it does to move from none to 19. So, unless you have stupid amounts of free commander experience sitting around, we're not going to be seeing people with 21 skill point captains anytime soon. When it comes to the subject of commander skill points, however, there is now a new way for you to get them, rather than simply putting those captains in charge of ships and putting those ships into battle. Now whenever you dismiss a captain, you get three options. Either just dismiss the captain and kiss him goodbye, or dismiss the captain and pay some credits and get back 25% of the commander skill points that you had invested into him, or pay gold and recover 100% of the commander skill points that you'd invested into that captain. Now, as a result of opening a ridiculous amount of Christmas loot boxes that had been gifted to me a couple of years ago, I happen to have more 10-point Royal Navy captains than I am ever going to be able to use. So I thought I'd put this new system to the test, and I went ahead and dismissed, for gold, a whole bunch of my Royal Navy surplus 10-point commanders. Just to give you a couple of numbers here, the cost to dismiss, for gold, a 10-point captain is 1,663 gold. And upon dismissal you recover 183,000 skill points for that captain, or 110 skill points per gold spent. To put this into context for you, 183,000 free commander experience is not quite enough to take a 10-point captain to a 12-point captain, and 1,663 gold is more or less the amount that you would spend in the premium shop to buy the Tachibana Premium Destroyer. As I'm sure you can imagine, it very quickly became prohibitively expensive to continue dismissing captains for gold. Now, I don't really want to outright say this is a bad thing, because don't forget, previously, whenever you dismissed a captain, you got nothing back. Under the new system, you at least have the option of recovering some or all of the skill points that you've earned on any given captain that you decide for whatever reason to dismiss. But it's not cheap. It's not cheap at all. It's in fact extremely expensive. So far we've covered a bunch of things that could be seen as good things, could be seen as bad things, just really depends on your point of view and how much gold you have to spend. But now we come on to the meat and bones of the commander skill rework. The actual commander skills themselves. Now, what I'm not going to be doing in this episode of Mingles with Jingles, just in case you were starting to panic, is turn this episode into a comprehensive guide to the various different skill builds now available in World of Warships after the commander skill rework. And I'm not going to be doing that for two very good reasons. The first, not everybody who listens to Mingles with Jingles plays World of Warships, so I don't want to get too technical. The second reason is that, well, here we are, nearly a week after the rework, and I still don't understand how a lot of these skills work. And that's a bit of a problem, because, well, I'm not exactly new to World of Warships, am I? I've been playing since it was in closed beta. You can probably divide the World of Warships player base into two distinct camps. And this is true of most games. World of Warships is not alone in this regard. You've got the small percentage of the player base who actually give a shit, care about how the game works, read the patch notes, try to understand the game mechanics and play accordingly. And then you've got the overwhelming majority who just don't really give a shit, they just want to play shooty boats. I do not fall into the category of players who don't give a shit and just want to play shooty boats. I do try to understand the game mechanics, and frankly, I just, well, don't anymore. It's not helped by vague and ambiguous skill descriptions, but that's only a small part of the problem. Prior to this rework, we had a smaller number of skills that were fairly simple to understand. They pretty much did exactly what it said on the tin. After the rework, we still have some skills that are fairly simple, comprehensively labelled, and it's fairly obvious how they work. But we've also got a whole bunch of skills that only appear to work every second Thursday in the month, that kick in while you're patting your head with your left hand and rubbing your stomach counterclockwise with your right hand. You've got skills, sometimes very expensive skills, that are only active under certain circumstances, and the game makes no effort whatsoever to explain when those circumstances are active. You know, when you've been detected by radar, you get the "I have been detected by radar" icon. Actually, that's another issue, because when you've been detected by radar and somebody's spotting you visually, you don't know that somebody's spotting you visually until the radar expires. And the "ooh, I've been detected by radar" icon gets replaced by the "hey, somebody's looking straight at you" icon. It might have been nice to know that somebody was looking straight at you while you were detected by radar, but the game just doesn't give you that kind of information. But that's an entirely other issue. Slightly more pertinent to the subject under discussion today is that when there are no visible hostile enemy ships within your standard detectability radius, the game makes no effort to let you know that the Deadeye skill is active. What's a standard detectability radius anyway? Is that the same as a base detection radius? Because the base detection radius is the detection radius of the ship without captain skills, concealment modules and all that sort of thing. Does it take into account environmental factors like reduced visibility as a result of sailing through a storm? Or increased visibility when your ship's on fire? Probably not, but it would be real nice to know for sure, one way or another, before you go and invest 4 skill points in a skill like Deadeye for battleship captains, which, by the way, you absolutely should be doing if you can afford it and you have the points, which of course makes a complete mockery of the stated intentions of the Commander skill rework, which Wargaming said were to, and I quote, "make it more flexible and convenient and give you a choice between several effective loadout options." This is of course almost complete bullshit, because there very definitely are certain skill builds that are vastly superior to others, and effectively cookie cutter builds that pretty much everybody with any sense is going to be using. A particular example is the Deadeye skill for battleships. Now, whether you know for sure exactly when your Deadeye skill is active or not, and it will largely be a matter of guesswork because, well, the game doesn't make any effort whatsoever to tell you. But battleship captains can, for the outlay of a mere 10 skill points, select Deadeye as their first Tier 4 captain skill, and they absolutely should. And if you don't know for sure whether or not there are any visible enemy ships within your standard detectability range, whatever the hell a standard detectability range is, then you can just do what pretty much all of the battleships are doing since the skill rework, and stay at the back of the map, sniping at everybody from 20 kilometers away. And if you do this, you will be rewarded handsomely for it, because your guns will now be 10% more accurate. With this skill, battleships are now more accurate at extreme range than they are at point blank range. Yes, you can still hilariously manage to miss with most of the shots fired at ranges of 3 kilometers, but have laser-like railgun accuracy at 20. None of this, of course, is encouraging battleships to actually get up forward and do a battleship's job of tanking the enemy. And why should they? Because a tanking build is far more expensive than a long-range Deadeye build. To build a battleship around brawling requires a minimum of 14 skill points. But to just loll around on the map border, landing multiple citadels at ranges of 20 kilometers only requires 10. So battleship captains who try to actually do a battleship's job, pushing forward at the right time and getting stuck in for their team, are now being punished by the fact that it's still just as hard to do and requires just as much skill as it did previously, but now you're less effective at it and it costs more captain points. Brawling secondary battleship builds like those found on the Massachusetts, for example, that are so much fun to play, are now also pretty much dead, since the skill that used to improve high-tier battleship secondary gun batteries with 60% increased accuracy now only increases the accuracy by 35%. So in all cases, skill builds for battleships that actually encourage good gameplay are now less effective and more expensive than simply cruising around the map border, shooting at everybody at maximum firing range. And this isn't just true of battleships, although I've been using battleships as an example. It's pretty much true of every type of ship, because when you move from a 19-point to a 21-point system, pretty much everything that you took for granted before the change is now going to become more expensive and less effective. So are these bad things? Or is this just simply a case of the game's meta changing again, and people haven't yet figured out how to deal with it? Honestly, my gut feeling is this is pretty bad. But I just don't know. There hasn't been enough time for things to shake out yet. I've cried wolf before, and I've been wrong. So I'm not confident enough, because I still don't fully understand how a lot of these skills work. Remember, the longer a game survives in the free-to-play market, the more complicated it tends to become. Maybe. That's the best I can say. My gut feeling is this is pretty bad. But it may be that I'm wrong. And in the coming weeks, as people adapt and improvise, a new game meta will emerge. I'm fairly sure that that new game meta will mostly revolve around battleships cruising the map borders, shooting at everybody from maximum range. But hey, on the bright side, you can now at least use one captain from each nation for all of your premium ships. And you can now recover the skill points invested in captains that you dismiss if you have enough gold. The only thing I can state with any degree of certainty is that things just got very interesting in World of Warships. Whether that ends up being interesting in a good way or interesting in a bad way, I guess we're going to see. One thing I feel I absolutely can state with 100% certainty, without any fear of contradiction, is that if you like to play PvE operations in battleships, you are pretty screwed. Because the build that is going to be effective in random battles, the sniper build, cruising around the map border, shooting at everybody from maximum range, is going to be 100% ineffective in operations, in which case you're going to need separate ships to play in operations, or you're going to be spending money swapping captains around. So, in that light, this Commander rework is yet another nail in the coffin of PvE ops. But according to Wargaming, nobody plays those anyway, and they really don't care. So anyway, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. Let me know what you think about the Commander skill rework down below in the comments. Good, bad, or you just don't know because you don't understand it. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Hope it's given you something to talk and think about. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.